Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. If and when need be, are you ready to live without electricity and running water, to let go of your car and phone, to wash your clothes by hand, to collect your shit, separate your urine, and live without a toilet? Are you ready for the candle life and otherwise being lights out at Earthdown? Are you ready to make your own music and your own instruments, your own tools, paper, and theater? Are you ready to solve problems in-house? Are you ready to protect your wives, children, elders, vulnerable, and yourself? Are you ready to posse up with brethren who do the same? Are you ready to draw the line accordingly? Are you ready to love everyone and to be at peace with everyone? Are you ready to be a healer and a teacher, patient? Are you ready to be disciplined? Are you ready to be authority? Are you ready to level up your practice of peace, sharing, chastity, honesty, sobriety? Are you ready to let go of your house, your bank account, your inheritance, and your credentials, your notions of ownership? Are you ready for the plant-based life? Are you ready to eat rice and beans on the daily, indefinitely? Are you ready to be modest and chaste, having sex only in marriage? Are you ready to study your heritage and optimize your relationship with your Creator and all creation? Are you ready to be honest, seriously honest, to come clean, make right, and continue on? Are you ready to settle your differences, to let go of your grudges and vendettas, forgive everyone who ever does anything to you, and to be continually reconciled each day? Are you ready for the heat? Are you ready for the cold? Without any AC or fan, without any furnace or central heating. Hashtag blanket life. Hashtag water life. Are you ready to sober up? Are you ready to let go of getting drunk? Are you ready to respect and restore the medicinal quality of plants, minerals, and elements? Are you ready to make paper, pencils, and pens from scratch? Are you ready to let go of money, to stack up some silver, and to bank on each other, to generate your own currency? Are you ready to barter and trade with Muslims and Jews and Hindus and Buddhists, Taoists, Christians, natives, Africans, Europeans, atheists, and others who accept your silver, who value your seva and crafts, and who share mutual respect with a fair deal at a higher price? Are you ready to live on rations? Are you ready to be modest and humble and support, serve, and protect modest and humble? Are you ready to live in marriage and to support, serve, and protect marriage? Are you ready to grind righteous on the daily, to study, teach, draw, sing, dance, sport? Are you ready to take care of home, to cook, clean, sew, heal, and sit quietly? Are you ready to live in an abandoned building, in the hood, in the outer burbs, in the country, and live with collected rainwater, solar-powered electricity, on-site sewage administration, and the shared political cooperation that makes this work? Are you ready to make your tools, make your economy, make your sovereign state without owning anything? Are you ready for the next level of civilization, to establish your caste of untouchable priest, sovereign, merchant, laborers, Jacks and Jills of all trades, masters of none? Are you ready to begin and maintain your sacred fire? That's not poetry. That's proclamation, announcement. That's actually recruitment, invitation. That's where we're at. That's what we are cultivating. That's what we are organizing. Plain and simple, candid. All those things. All those things we already do. As it states at the beginning, if and when need be. All the things we already do in that joint. Actually, I can't say that. Marriage, well, I can't say that. So, the guidance and the intention is doing it increasingly, regularly, cooperatively with others who share in this discipline and this direction. So that's some of the joint. What else we got to share at this moment? That's the main thing. On the note of economy, we are notified recently that there's a very legendary brethren, Rastafari musician that visits here recently. Somewhat late notice. Requiring to check on the calendar again, because this is just the state of where our spiritual path is at the moment, our practices. But it was on a holy day that precludes us from actually attending. But even beyond that, just the pricing of the tickets and the circumstances initially were just preclusive from patronizing the performance that the brethren shares. So, with all due respect, precluded from attending. Now, that being said, what we look at as a when we open ourselves to consideration of attending, first, we, as it says here, we let it go of money. Like, we don't deal with money too tough. So when kinfolk solicit money for trade and services and this and the other, like, we have to make moves to acquire the money. Otherwise, we're concentrating on the home front of securing land and building and the basic economy of the necessities that we have. So without money. So that's what we focus on. And when kinfolk solicit us to go back into the money game, we have those means, but at the same time, it's like changing gears, and the cost of transaction, the cost of transition. Like, for example, like in operations management, one of the first things we learn is that when we're talking about like things like FedEx, UPS, even Amazon, like the big cost factor when shipping, and additionally, is anytime somebody puts hands on the object, on the product. So particularly like configuring shipping routes, there's the hub methodology, there's direct routes, and otherwise there are all the different methodologies of distributing things as like from the old days of Sears Roebuck all the way through today. It's probably way advanced globally, continentally, and otherwise. So point is that anytime there's a point of transition, anytime the product is taken from the factory onto a loading freight, or a factory onto the freight train, from the freight train container to a ship to go overseas, from the ship onto the road transportation, or whenever that's a big labor cost. So it's not a matter of how long the distance is. Otherwise, that's not the big cost factor. It's how much it goes in the transactions. And again, in looking at money, when you go to a different country and you're looking to exchange currency, uh, it's one, you have to do the exchange rate, and it's not always the favorable thing, because people, the brokers who do that, they buy low and sell high. So when they're buying a currency and issuing the local currency, they're devaluing the foreign currency that you're bringing, regardless of what it is, and they're giving you a lesser value concerning the local currency. And then when you're leaving the country and you want to exchange all the local currency you have to get the foreign currency that you're going back to, it's going to be a different rate, because that's arbitrage. That's the service that's provided. So that's the cost of transactions. Every time you go to the ATM, I don't even know cats do any of these things these days. ATMs, and people even change money these days. I'm telling my age. But point is, anytime there's a transaction, that's costs. So when kinfolk ask us or solicit us to give money, that's changing up the game and reverting back to old things, and it's costly. So there's propensity of securing money, but at the same time, it's just like we're picking up speed in this direction, and then you're soliciting us to change lanes and go off on that direction for just a brief period before we go back onto this direction, and then we have to pick up momentum again and everything. So many kinfolk don't care. Many kinfolk just like, yo, this is life. This is how society is. We get that. We agree. But we are not invested as heavily within it as many are. And within Rastafari, which is where this is specifically, particularly directed, and for people who are similarly inclined, where there is a consciousness, there's a spiritual consciousness, but even just an ethical consciousness and further of being independent from the predatory natures of systems and institutions. That includes money. So when we look at just the methodology of culture, music, how much that is still, even when it's Rastafari kinfolk who are doing it, and even when the message that Rastafari kinfolk are sharing is positive, the business side of it is still very much enveloped in the predatory imperialist oppression, downpression. So it does obviously hinder the message, the efficacy, and otherwise when it's other than holistic. So, anyways, without being a critic, this is actually a solution. This is a suggestion, humble suggestion, for I and I to consider as I and I continue in the economics of culture and further. So, I can go in a review about just how mass distribution, how much the artists are leveraged in that respect. We can talk about even when it's independent labels, it's still relying upon the infrastructure. And my knowledge about social media and those marketing methodologies is comparatively modest. The whole notion of brand, don't you have enough of brands from past 400 years? Let's get off the brand thing, the brand mentality. And that's with all due love and respect. But let's be honest about that and what we're actually talking and conjuring and continuing with that concept. My knowledge about social media and additionally the methodologies of contemporary marketing and additionally is comparatively modest. The basics are still the same though. And it's still very much relying upon an infrastructure that is a foreign to and of Rastafari. For example, when we look at platforms like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and whatever else is going on, all the new joints and everything else like that, obviously recognizing that very few of these, if any, I mean, I've named some recently, of blessed brethren and sistren who are doing this, but even then, it's hosted through the facilities of other kinfolk, the web hosts, the servers, and additionally, it's all outside kinfolk, and that's fine. We have to cooperate and work with other kinfolk, but it's just a matter of recognizing that, because when we talk about that sense of hosting ourselves, like when we are hosting, we have that sense of belonging, and we don't say control or ownership, but when we have that sense of stability and like saying what's what, we don't have that on this joint. Rastafari is a guest on the internet, online. Um, and it's beneficial to recognize that and not to presume, even though kinfolk have a free channel on YouTube or whatever, to presume some type of sovereignty even on these joints. Because at any second, somebody else can make a decision of just pulling this, that, and the other, or saying, "Oh, sitting down rules," or whatever else. So it's like it's comparable. And I said I was going to say solutions, but this is a little bit of a segue to that. If you go to Russia, if Rastafari goes to Russia, Rastafari is already in Russia somehow, some way. But if you go to Russia and then set up shop, you want to set up like a cafe or smoke shop or whatever. You recognize you're in Russia. You got to work by Russia's rules. So as long as even in terms of like being Rastafarian, additionally, you always know you're in somebody else's house. And so there's only so much you can do in terms of being like genuinely or authoritatively Rastafari. Now that's applicable to every country or whatever else. But my point for that is to avoid getting this presumption of ownership or control or like we got this on the internet when that's not the case. Don't have control of devices, how people receive the message. Don't have control over the airwaves, the signals, the satellite systems that distribute the message. Don't have control over the servers, and additionally that are hosting the platforms, and additionally online, the software, and additionally. And so recognize that in each of these aspects, each of these components, it's an impingement on the sovereignty. It's an impingement on the communication. It's an impingement on the efficacy of building and reasoning in a way that is righteous and in a way that is Rastafari. There are kinfolk. I mean, the way the business is set up, there's little, there's a lot of room for people to do different types of stuff, and so it's not the levels of like woeful impingement and additionally are comparatively modest. What is the further impingement is when kinfolk try to build further. All right, stop off the negative onto the positive. One other thing though is this. Well, I'll frame this as a suggestion. So let's work at suggestion: positive, affirmational, constructive suggestions. One is for Rastafari brethren who are musicians to only perform at venues that are stewarded, quote unquote, owned by Rastafari brethren. And you say, well, that significantly reduces the candidates and opportunities for doing things and putting bread on the table. And additionally, well, there's that element. However, at the same time, it's a matter of recognizing how valuable the culture is, and saying that just performing at Rastafari venues, and being motivated to create venues, to cooperate with each other, to pool resources together, acquire additional land, identify land that Rastafari brethren already have, and establish venues there, and invite kinfolk for festivals, and additionally, and hike up the price, because that is the value of the culture. That is the value of the healing. Look at how much people are spending for medicine today, for pharmaceuticals. It's ridiculous. Look at the price of inflation, and recognize that the culture that Rastafari brethren and sisters provide is medicine. And so the services of culture are commensurate with the trillions of dollars, likely, I know it's multi-billions of dollars, but likely trillions of dollars, if not further, that people are spending on pharmaceuticals, prescription drugs, non-prescription drugs, surgeries, vacations, all the different therapy, all these other things. So recognize that Rastafari music, the positivity with a positive message, the positive vibration, and additionally, that's medicine, and that's expensive these days, particularly because when the prices of pharmaceuticals and then the prices of college tuition and everything else goes up, that increases the price of bread and bottled water. How about that? And all the prices go up. That's the nature of the inflation, and people are trying to keep up with the industries that are in demand and raising up their prices. So all their industries are trying to match that and keep up somewhat. So that raises the prices for everybody. So it's appropriate when you're playing the price game, when you're playing the money game, to hold stern and strong in the negotiations, and be ready to be without, and find the alternative methodologies of putting food on the table. Work further with Rastafari brethren who already have land in Africa and additionally, and are growing things already, and look on and striving and um, trotting to build further. So it's already here. Then even if we when we reach those capacities and optimizing those opportunities, then work with the governments that are working with those kinfolk and say, hey, we've got a lot of educated, motivated, disciplined kinfolk, and we've got these proven methodologies of organic agriculture, and additionally, we provide a service to the communities that surround us, and the societies that surround us. We have education, we have discipline, we have ethics, we have knowledge, we have peace, we have sobriety. These are assets to a society, and we have stories, we have songs, and further. So recognize the value, and stand firm in the negotiation process, and be disciplined in terms of accepting just the quick contract or whatever else, and reserve the services, reserve the treasures, to places that genuinely value and respect that. So venues is one thing, because all right, I'm not going to get into the whole prostitution of culture and everything else like that. It's a nasty thing. It's a very difficult thing because it's so pervasive within our experience, from JA to BK and LA and all of that. So we know that we don't have to get too much into it, but it's a tenacious thing, because it's a favorable alternative very often, not always, but often, to torture and murder, the pimp game I'm talking about. But at the same time, it's nasty, and at some point we have to stand on our own too, and be ready to go without those favors, and like hit the streets ourselves and just deal with what the situation is. So that's applicable to the culture, how we share the culture and the music, and additionally, and I'm speaking in this first person, singular, plural, I and I style, recognizing that my forte and the services that I bring are other than music and culture. It's scripture and education and world civilization education. So am I just pointing fingers and telling other kinfolk what to do? I'm speaking in a collective sense, recognizing that we're in it together. I'm that this is the walk that I walk. So I'm not saying anything that I don't already do myself. Now, I don't have the occasion of doing venues and stuff like that per se. However, we are involved in that directly, indirectly, and we are increasingly staked within the collective endeavors of Rastafari and our ethics-based community of the world. So we recognize culture as a predominant service of sharing the knowledge and the healing that we have. So we do have certain, not going to say skin in the game, but we do have certain stake involved. So venues is one of the suggestions of just looking at Rastafari sanctioned, or not sanctioned, but Rastafari stewarded venues. That's it. Big name brethren and sistren, small name brethren and sistren, let that speak for itself. But other thing is cultivating relationships with municipalities, philanthropies, civic institutions, schools, community centers, libraries, local in different locations around this continent of the United States, but also obviously in the islands, Africa, Europe, Asia, and additionally, but cultivating relationships so that there's an established, I say venue. Am I contradicting myself right there? Um, I'm going to continue in sharing this suggestion. If for those who are sticklers and want to describe this as a direct contradiction to the exclusivity of venue proclamation that I just make, we can talk about that. We can reason about that. But what I'm suggesting here, what I and I are suggesting here, is rather than the standard t- music tour or whatever of hitting up the venues, recognizing that that's usually where the musicians make the majority of the money because the distribution methodology is pretty much paying back the system that makes it available. So kinfolk make their money significantly from the tours. So rather than doing that and working with promoters and going to the big venues and having the tickets at a high price and everything else like that, adjusting the methodology so that, because again, that lends itself much to the prostituting culture scenario. So what we humbly suggest is the consideration and the endeavor of going through the work of cultivating relationships with institutions so that when going on tour, instead of just hitting up one city a night and at the biggest venue for the biggest number of tickets or whatever, and valuing each other based upon how much the venue holds and how much was sold and how much the tickets were and everything else like that, value the relationship of the participants within the cultural exchange. So by this I'm talking about a venue like, I won't say Cleveland because that's going to be too close, but a venue like Chicago, let's say. So get an agent. Again, it could be Rastafari, Brethren, or otherwise, but an agent who reaches out to numerous institutions within the Shire area, in the land of the Ojibwe, and securing relationships with a number of the institutions there. Again, like I said, schools, public schools, private schools, libraries, community centers, civic organizations, um, cultural groups, and additionally, and organize smaller venues, or there's a lot of different options in this realm, but the thing is that the groups that participate are not paying for a performance; they're paying for the relationship. So it's a yearly membership due, and in paying that membership, they're entitled perhaps there can be levels of the membership, but certain level of membership entitles to one visit, and again, there's so many different ways of organizing this, but that visit can be with specific musicians. It can be a core of musicians so that there's somebody who's going to visit, and then rather than just like a performance of just a show and tell, it's interactive and like sharing and further. So that might be a little bit much for particularly big name brethren and sisterin, but though along those lines. So that's the norm, and the cost is significant, and private schools, universities can well afford it. Municipalities can well afford it. Smaller groups, schools in the hood, and additionally public schools, private schools, home schools, and additionally there are arrangements that may be made. We tend to work on the sliding scale of percentage of income rather than necessarily a specific fee. And we don't, and again, we don't work with money too tough anyways, but even when we talk about silver and otherwise, it's along those lines predominantly. So, anyways, the efficacy of the communication right now is waning. So, um, that's part of the solution. Adjusting the methodology, uh, assuming further authority and say so concerning the circumstances in sharing the culture, uh, making it increasingly accessible to those who are going to do something further positive and constructive with the culture, Elohim willing, rather than just utilizing it as party music, get drunk, get high, whatever, and feel the vibration, and then the next day just go back to conquest and imperialism. So, um, because again, there may be a reduction in terms of monetary compensation in the short term. Um, there's the preparation. First of all, when we cut out the middlemen, that 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 helps to balance and increase the amount of that is actually of the service fees that are actually recouped, that are secured. When you work with the venues, like a lot of the costs and additionally are significantly reduced. When we work with villages, um, when we're able to provide residences for musicians, long-term residences, contracts, or rather than just salary, but actually timeshares, or however you want to describe that, in terms of having a place to stay for 5 years, even after the contract of performance is completed. There's some equity within the domiciles, within the villages that are stewarded by Rastafari communities. Um, those are further steps towards strengthening an independent economy and strengthening the integrity and leverage in negotiating with outside entities as well. Uh, so it's very simple. It's within our doing. It involves a certain amount of coordination and planning. It involves quellings of egos and recognizing in devotion to shared purpose and shared vision. Uh, anyways, those are some of the thoughts at the moment. Again, for brethren who find some type of value within that. Um, Otherwise, likely brethren not even listening to this at this moment. So, insistence. So, um, there was something else on another topic. The energy level, to be honest, is significantly depleted just in beginning this half an hour ago. It's at the end of the day. Trying to think, I have had something to eat today, but something is actually being prepared now. So energy level is low. Um, I share the beginning joint. That's our call, um, for like for what we're involved with, like what it is, and focusing on that. And for kinfolk who aren't on that, that's fine. But at the same time, like there's less for us to talk about, because kinfolk who aren't on that mindset are again, it's either kinfolk, what's it called, kinfolk, something about being with the program, or there was something there was some slogan or whatever that I shared in recent days. But basically, it's like either kinfolk are on this kind of path, or kinfolk are just like enveloped in the systemic way of doing things, the imperialism and the predatoriness. And I mean, that's not, that we're not, don't want to hate on that, and otherwise, but that's just the facts. And even when kinfolk have a nice game, we're not. This isn't judgmentalism. It's not intended in that respect. But we have to. It's beneficial for us to become increasingly ardent in recognizing this dichotomy, because it's so easy to kind of just slip back into status quo. So we have to be mindful and continually vigilant in expressing this path and the distinction, and the insistence. Um, it's other than an absolute. We always have to compromise, and we always have to be flexible and negotiate. But at the same time, it's like fundamentals. Like this is what it is: securing the home front, being proficiently, significantly autonomous from the systemic way of the systemic predatory ways of convention, um, and enduring the difficulties, the challenges, the discomforts that go with that. Being without a fan, being without AC, when the heat hits, being without the well, don't have a choice about the heater. This turns on automatically, but being without the electricity. To be honest, the toilet works right now. We're working with the toilet, but within recent years, for numerous months on end, we live without a toilet, literally separating our urine and from our shit, and depositing our shit separately in the sewage system outside, in the sewage drain outside. Was it? It was out of essential necessity because we don't deal with the management here. So whenever there's a difficulty, whatever, and we can't do it ourselves, we have to do without. So, but it was also an exercise about how to live like that, and it's not easy. It's not easy. It's a very extremely mentally challenging thing, to have to deal with one's own shit. It's not pleasant. It's beyond just uncomfortable of just even thinking about it, but just to deal with that, like every time they have to relieve oneself, like we have to do something with it. It doesn't magically vanish with a push of a button. Like we have to do something with it. Otherwise, it sits there, and it fills the air. And so, get that out of here. That we know what that is for months on end. Like it's not a matter of like, oh, we'll just deal with it for a few days. No, we know what it's like, and we learn the discipline. We learn how to deal with it. We learn that, wait a minute, it is all right. How about the squat? It's very beneficial to have that skill set to be able to squat. It makes it much easier to separate urine from feces, to deposit the feces in a portable container and transport it outside further expediently. Now, I'll be honest, we'll go into the details about this. We would select specific times of the day to do it, because obviously not trying to be seen, and it's not a matter of hiding it per se, but that does factor in because kinfolk find any type of excuse to call out other kinfolk, and for any type of reason or any type of motivations. When kinfolk already have enough motivations concerning what we do for years, so that ain't no thing. And to be honest, we're further acculturated, and our relationships are stronger at this moment with a number of different factions, where in preceding years, even within the preceding year, there are considerable challenges. Now, without getting into all the details of that, it's less concerned. But in those days, a few years ago, when we were dealing with the shit situation, we're making sure we weren't out in the broad daylight where we'd have the propensity of interacting with people on the way to the sewage drain, and cause some kind of disturbance or discomfort, because there's little hiding what we're doing. So it would be either at the darkness of night, and not in the middle of the night, because again that also lends itself to certain suspicions. What is this person doing in the middle of the night? Because all right, let's go into detail. We're going into detail. How about that? All right. So that's where we're going with this joint. That's what happens when we're fatigued. We talk about shit. So I'm not going to give everything, but I'll share like the deposit component of it when depositing it from outside the domicile. We learn a lot of different methodologies, to be honest, and it wasn't the best options either to begin with. It was just like what was most convenient at the moment in terms of well, what was most convenient, and then it becomes increasingly a matter of like what's the most proficient. So I'll say at one point, the methodology involved um, putting the complete deposit. I have to think about this. All right, okay. Depositing the entirety in a hamper, like it's like a clothes basket. All of these things have already been since after this have been discarded. They've been whatever. But there would be two like clothes hampers, that if that those type of containers. So the feces and everything would be deposited in one, and then with water so that it wouldn't stick to the plastic too tough or whatever. So it would just be in liquid form, and that way it was easier to deposit into the sewage drain, and then walk outside with that bucket or whatever of feces in water, so it's liquefied, and then having walking with another bucket of clear water. And so we would again during the, like right after dusk, as it's dark and less visible at night, depending upon the time of year. I'm trying to think. It was kind of cold. It might have been spring or autumn. It's probably autumn. Um, but anyways, like around dusk, because we're working with a light daylight. So it was right after dusk. It was when it just gets dark. Fewer people are out just doing casual stuff or whatever, and so there's less likelihood of encountering or walking by somebody to be found out or whatever, or to bother anybody. So walking with one with the feces and another one with clear water. So then when getting to the sewage drain, which is about 50 meters away, maybe less than 100 meters away, then we would endeavor to deposit the entirety of the feces collection in one little dump, rather than getting streaks and everything else like that. So it would be as clean of a dump as possible. Then afterwards, because then stuff would be caught on the tops of the sewage drain and everything, and we want to impose as little as possible on the infrastructure and the system. One, that because just that's the general principle when we look at native tradition, and additionally, like leave things as we find it. And additionally, that's one thing. Second thing again is as having as little culpability, or not culpability, but being called out less of being an imposition, because already when we get static for playing the drum, and additionally, this is like an easy joint. So we make sure that when we dumping, we make it as clean as possible. So we did it with one swoop, deposit it, and then for the remnants that were on top of the drain, or otherwise, or if there was like the liquid that had over spilled from the drain, that's when we take the bucket of clear water, and then we would wash. We would dump it, not wash, because we wouldn't do a lot of the scrubbing or whatever. It was outside, so it's less of concern. And it was the sewage drain. So we would, and I say sewage drain, but it could also be like the rain runoff drain, depending on how you want to classify these things. So it was enough of the drain space to accommodate what we were doing in that respect. So then we would take the clear water and then kind of just dump it around wherever there was any collection outside of the sewage drain, so that it would be essentially clean after our transaction. Then return back to the domicile, and then clean out the containers accordingly for the next utilization. So that was the general methodology. Now they're much further, in our estimation, much further effective and prudent methodologies. Again, one is immediately separating between the urine and the feces. That involves urinating in a different container than what one does the feces in, and it's expedient and convenient simply to deposit the feces directly in a portable container, like a plastic bag or otherwise, so that the necessity of cleaning any items, a bin or receptacle that collects the feces, is less of a necessity, and it goes directly to the portable bag. And yes, it's unrecyclable plastic or whatever else, and there's the fact. But then in that option, in that scenario, then we have to have someplace to deposit the feces. And one of our concerns was depositing that in the regular garbage thing, or even for the municipal pickup, because now we're imposing upon the municipal workers for dealing with that, and that can be a cause of concern. And it could be like a legal liability on the part of the workers if they observe like a considerable dumpage of sewage material in the regular refuse. That that's not a usual thing. It's not there could be health concerns or perceived health concerns accordingly. So we that's one of the reasons why we abstain from doing that. But that is a further prudent option, particularly because of the ideal. I mean, and it's actually very prudent and it's actually very beneficial to do this regularly, to separate urine and feces, and to utilize the feces for compost. One, to eat healthy so that the feces that is produced is further optimal for being utilized as compost. And I'm not going to speak as an authority about the health the absolute health qualities of human feces being utilized for compost. I am aware that other kinfolk do that. It's not a big thing that people talk about, but the logic is that cow feces, bull feces, and additionally being utilized for manure for fertilizing plants. Same thing with human feces. Now, again, it's recognizing consuming non-toxic, healthy nutrients. But at the same time, um, there's going to be some type of criticism or naysaying about that or whatever. But I'm aware that kinfolk do this, and so that's the optimal circumstance or scenario, even when it's not the necessity, even when it's not a dire situation or whatever. But just as a regularity, finding a systemic, convenient way, comfortable way, separating urine from feces, depositing the urine within the water streams in a healthy way, and then utilizing the feces with compost, and additionally to fertilize the organic agriculture that feeds us. So that sounds nasty, but again, psychologically, kinfolk have been very separated just from bodily functions, categorically, not just defecation and urination, but eating, sex, just health. Kinfolk have been very. There's a psychological dissonance when we talk about natural bodily functions. It's part of the etiquette of society and civilization, but it's also part of the methodology of separating an individual from an individual self, and discouraging that individual into dependency upon the expertise, the knowledge of others, to be able to guide people in people's bodily functions. So, anyways, point being, like, in the meanwhile, it's very difficult, very often for most people, to talk about going to the bathroom and all of the things that I just said. But this is exactly what's involved in the solutions that we are living. When we talk about the circumstances of society, and the things that we find disagreeable, when we distance ourselves from those disagreeable things, when we distance ourselves from the benefits and the conveniences that we experience with those difficult things, we have to deal with a lack of those conveniences. So the toilet is one situation. Like I said before, the toilet is on right now. We don't separate the urine and the feces at this moment. We're concentrating on other things at this moment. But in our endeavor, there is the prospect, there is the propensity of again, living in an abandoned building without electricity, without running water, collecting the rainwater, living on rations, and having to deal with our shit. So, and we can look at intentional communities and what intentional communities do today. We can look at historic examples. Gandhi living in doing satyagraha, living in, I think it's called first Tolstoy Farm, but the ashram back in Zulu land, where that was part of the thing that people had to get accustomed to, as it's depicted in the film, like cleaning the latrine, doing the nasty things that particularly middle class, upper middle class people are accustomed for other people to doing. Washing laundry by hand, not just putting it in a laundry, I don't even know what it's called now, washing machine. And then all of a sudden, there, boom, it's magically clean. Oh, put in the dryer, boom, it's magically dry. Um, so it's dealing with knowing how to deal, not just physically, not just knowing how to do those things. Um, and it's one thing to know how to do it well, and then it's another thing to know how to do it for what's needed at this moment. Because when doing it well and thorough, it takes time and energy, and don't always have that to be available. So, well, how much do we need to do it at this moment? Like, how much do we have to do to make it an effective job? So, um, and how not to utilize, like, overextend oneself. Because I learned the difficult way, like wringing out clothes. Yo, for a middle-aged man, 50-year-old man, doing this and squeezing tight, yo, that puts a lot of strain, particularly with my delicate scholarly hands. It puts a lot of strain on the hands right here. And I popped something one time. I felt it pop, and for the next 2 weeks, it was very difficult to utilize. So, simple thing like that when drying, when wringing out the clothes to put it on the clothes rack. Um, we learn, okay, you know what? Probably not going to be doing that too often. So instead, we learn, let it sit, and like drip dry in a tub, primarily. I might do a light wringing to get a lot of the excess water out. But before putting on the clothes rack that doesn't have any sheet to collect the water, whatever, let it sit in the tub and drip dry for a while until it's finished essentially drip drying, and then put it on the clothes rack. Now, the thing is with with washing clothes is you got to do it timely, because if you let we're going to talk about clothes now. The lentils are brewing at the moment, and I got to make sure they got enough water on there. So with the clothes, I mean, again, there's a whole spectrum of how to wash clothes by hand. There are a lot of tips, and it depends on what the circumstances are. There's the ideal situation when there's enough time and energy and everything else like that. But then there's also like I just need this not to be too funky right now. And that's not the most pleasant and like polite kind of statements to be making, but this is actual. So, part of the methodology, the basic methodology, the further frequent one washes the clothes, the less thorough the washing has to be, because the less dirty it is. You'd be surprised how dirty clothes are. After soaking for hours, and additionally and wringing that out and rinsing it out, and then soaking again, you still see the sediment that's collected. It's like, yeah, what's going on? And additional soap ain't gonna do it on its own. And additionally, it's not a matter of it making it smell nice. It's a matter of like getting the funk, the dirt, and soil out. So, basic tip is, one, to do the soak. If you soak it in hot water, it tends to be further effective in kind of like loosening up the clothing and loosening out the dirt. I mean, hot water, I mean, if you have any knowledge about cleaning, hot water is further effective than cold water, generally speaking. So there's that. Now, that being said, if you leave the clothes in hot water for an extended period, particularly in the summer months when the air is warm too, it's going to get funky, because that lends itself to just life, and the mold and fungus and everything else like that. So if it's left over, you forget it overnight or whatever, fun times, because now it's going to be stank and dirty, and now it's like it's not going to be satisfactory after that wash. It's a matter of like going through the process again, letting it dry out and air out, and then eventually washing again. You can wear the clothes, but it's gonna have a stank funk to it. All right, so basic scenario. Let it soak. It could be hot water, it could be cool water. Hot water tends to be further effective, but it's beneficial to be attentive. Letting that soak. Then after letting it soak, first of all, also like be moderate in how much clothes you put. We utilize again another hamper, not the same hamper we shit in. It's a different hamper, but same size and mechanics. So, it is the same tub too. We wash and scrub the tub every time we deal with the shit situation too, and that was a few years ago. It was not pleasant. It was not pleasant, and it did involve a lot of effort, because we did scrub and wash and squash each time we do that. because we are aware, not just a matter of hygiene, but also about health, and how that's one of the methodologies of getting rashes and other things as well. So did our best and actually didn't have much challenges in that respect. That's not even like the litmus test. But anyways, um, washing clothes, letting it soak. Um, the duration might be half an hour, depending upon how much is necessary to let the soil out. Again, warmer water is further effective in loosening up the soil within the clothing. After that, wringing gently the clothes out, because not too much strain on the hands. It can be rather labor intensive, but just generally rinsing or wringing out the clothing, because again, that's where it has the soil. Even the aside from just the soil that's in the water now, that's kind of come out on its own, it's been sitting in that water, and it still has soil in it. So trying to get as much of that out as possible, then putting it in clear water. Again, it can go through a number of processes depending upon how clean you want it. You can go in clean water, see how clean the clothes are after that first soak. If you want to let it soak again, you can do that. Again, you could make it cold water or whatever else. Then when that stage is satisfactory, then it's a matter of getting to the wash stage. So the wash stage, that's when you can apply some product. If you want to be luxurious, you can put some soap in there, or you can just do some vinegar and baking soda, or whatever the selection is, and then do in that process. It's kind of like just agitating the water, agitating the clothes to work it through, trying to get whatever soil is still in there to get that out as much as possible. And again, when completing that, again, a light wringing of the clothing just to get that out. And then putting it in clear water of the rinse cycle, and let that go there. After soaking it the first time, it's not necessary to let it soak any further. Now it's a matter of just getting it through, processing it and getting it through. So once you get into the washing stage, do the wash joint, and then do the rinse joint, just clear water. And that's, again, you see when after putting it into the rinse portion, like how clean the clothes actually are or not are, and then how satisfactory that is at that moment. And at that point, I guarantee you're going to be less motivated to wash it any further. So it's kind of like, yo, it's going to be what it's going to be for this cycle, and then we'll see for the next one. And then after that, after rinsing it, it's advisable to rinse it in cold water, because that it's like it closes the capillaries, kind of, sort of. Like it dulls the funky, the scent component, and one can talk about rinsing it or doing the rinse with warm water or whatever. But again, if it's warm water clothes that are on the line, that lends itself to the funky element. So that's the other reason. The cold water kind of deactivates the organisms that are in the clothing, in additionally. So there's less susceptibility to the feces of the organisms, and that's actually what we are informed is what the funkiness is. It's actually the feces of the organisms that are feeding from the nutrients of the soil. So the cold water slows that process up or whatever, so that when it's on the line, again, depending upon what the time frame is allowable for it to dry, but the warmer the clothes are, whatever, the quicker it dries. But it doesn't make much of a difference, because soaking wet clothes is soaking wet clothes. Room temperature tends to like hit one way or the other. So cooling it with some rinsing it with some cool water, and then from there, again, like I said, you can either wring it, not bone dry, but you can like wring it very dry, but that's a strain on the hands. And then hang it up on a clothes rack to dry, or you can lay it lay the clothes around the hamper or whatever, and let them drip in the tub, drip dry for maybe like half an hour or so, and then from there transport the clothes to the rack, and then let them dry further and fully on the rack. Without dripping onto the floor. If you have a mat, a some type of floor covering or whatever that can collect the water. It's a considerable amount of water that drips from the clothing if it just let it be. So, but if you have a mat or something, or I said magnet, if you have a pad or something to collect and even absorb the water from getting onto the floor and damaging the floor, then there's less necessity of wringing out the clothes or letting it drip dry before, because you can do a like the upside down lid of a container, or a few lids of a container or whatever, to collect the water like a potter plant. So anyways, that's part of washing clothes. Washing dishes. If kinfolk need a tutorial on washing dishes, we can do that, but that's some steps. We can talk about food, food advisory. I'm also being mindful as it gets dark here. You can see that. We are, as I've said before, in these joints, we're being mindful of sharing what we have and what we do further directly and intentionally with kinfolk who properly value it and who utilize it properly. Like, we're at a point where the things that we have, it's other than just a matter of freely giving, and it's not a matter of being stingy and withholding it from people, but just recognizing that when we give freely, just like the man with the seed along the path, like, not everybody utilizes it in an optimal way. So we have to be further mindful about how we share things, because one, that's the prudence of the wisdom that's conferred upon us, but also secondly, and much distantly secondly, and there may be additional things before this secondly, but further along the lines of less significance, is the fact that like, our lives are valued based upon what we share. So if cats are improperly valuing what we share, cats are improperly valuing our lives and supporting our lives. When cats properly value what we share, then cats properly value our lives and our well-being. So we are increasingly mindful of this, and we're at a different stage at this point of life in our path, so that, again, we're called less upon to just give freely to whoever we encounter, and to be further intentional. It could be understood as the household mode, and it's not just a matter of like only serving ours and this and the other, but we've given thoroughly everything, the best of what we have, and we are called to be family. We are called to be married and have children, and raise children, and support, and nurture, and educate and provide for our children. So we recognize that this involves proper support and cooperation from others, and that proper support and cooperation comes from kinfolk who properly value our gifts, that what we bring to the table. So anyways, we're guiding ourselves and being further prudent in what we share. The project that I'm working on now is a World Lit study program. So it's a collection of basically legends, teachers from the different cultures around the world, from the beginnings of civilization to this day. There's a little over 100 people from, again, all around the world: African, Asian, European, Mediterranean, native, from the beginning of creation through the different epochs. There's the selection of these particular teachers is based upon being properly, I don't want to say diversified, I don't want to say inclusive, but properly in proper relation with the different civilizations of Earth. And so that's one. And then to make that further accessible, rather than covering all the bases, going as close to the source of the different schools and lineages as possible, so that rather than saying everybody, and we do in certain instances include a number of people within the lineages, but generally speaking, rather than saying all the different prominent teachers, world-known teachers that are in a particular lineage, we make sure, to the best of our ability, we focus on like the beginning teacher or the beginning sovereign, the monarch, or whoever that is, the beginning prophet of a lineage, and then inviting kinfolk to do further research and study to find further about the successors within that lineage. So again, we have a list of about 120 kinfolk by name, individuals. Some, well, I won't go into describing all the details about this, but that's what we have. Now, I'm still in the process of organizing it and formatting it. Still, actually, to be honest, putting some of it together. This is a compilation of a lot of material that we produce through the years, and kind of hone it and make it further concise and presentable. So the World Lit study program contains an introductory segment that just gives a basic primer about the world, geography, and how to perceive the lines of the world. Looking at the rivers as a primary element, languages and counters, as we always say, song, stories, rituals, and ethics. But then also looking at the migration, looking at the movement, and then looking where the lines are drawn amidst that movement through the generations. So that's just the general introductory framework. And then from that, we share the list of 100 some odd kinfolk legends of world civilization, and there are a number of different ways of presenting this list. One is by grouping of geography. Another one is by chronology, so that we see the different legends next to each other based upon when those legends walk the earth. And so that's revealing in and of itself. We draw this basically from Wikipedia articles. I mean, it's a culmination of years and even generations of study, of knowing who's who in world civilization, as humbly as we can be in this respect, but who's who within world civilization, and then from there, basically just once we make that identification from what we already know, for the most part, some of the things we kind of researched based on, like we would know a people that was appropriate to include, particularly from Native tradition, even if we didn't know the name of a prominent chief or leader from that people. So we one of the protocols of this project is to identify individuals, because we can learn further. We often learn better by looking at the examples in the life or the ways of an individual, rather than just speaking in a generality. So we made sure that rather than just referencing a people and even the cultures of a people or the principles of a people, to identify at least one person from that people who is a leader, who's a recognized leader, and then applying the principles of the culture and additionally to that person and as that frame of reference. So we categorize by geography, like I said, the rivers, and then also chronology, and then basically we just acquire the Wikipedia article for each of these legends, and so we're working away, God willing, to include each of these articles. And again, we're not selling this, we're not making money from this, we're sharing it just as a education, and we're making it available online. We're working through Blurb, so that there is a cost factor into it, because we don't set that, but just the price for doing the service of publishing the book, Blurb charges a cost. So we have to pay that when we purchase the book. So anybody else who wants to purchase the book, they pay what Blurb says is the price based upon the number of pages and hardbound. And wow, do we do this color? Probably. It is effective for the maps particularly, but there's a lot of text. Maybe do it as 2 books, to be honest, because we can do the initial book. Well, I'm thinking now. Because if we do in the scenario that where we include the articles, that just need like, well, but the articles have a photograph in it though. Maybe just the whole thing color. Whoa, that's gonna make it expensive. But point being, we don't make any money. We don't add anything to that cost that Blurb charges for the. It's like printing. Like if we're going to take this to a printer, if we're going to go into the neighborhood printer or whatever, um, this is the cost of printing it. So that's how we're providing it available. And again, all the articles are from Wikipedia, which is a free source anyways. We have a positive relationship with Wikipedia. We're not doing a lot of legal research in terms of copyright claims or whatever else. We're not. This is for educational purposes. That oftentimes negates those type of concerns. We're not making money off of it. That also tends to negate those concerns. So, anyways, and that's one of the reasons why we work through the Wikipedia articles, because it is universal. Like all the articles for all the cultures are from Wikipedia. We initially began going to traditional Orthodox sources from each of the communities to get the information about the legends. It's further labor intensive, to be honest, but even beyond that, it's not available for everything. And so it would be like for maybe 30 or 40% of the people on the list, we would have like very authentic, like from the Orthodox practitioners articles from the tradition. But then for the rest of the people, it would be just like Wikipedia articles. And so we found that was a little bit of an imbalance in terms of the presentation. So we just went all Wikipedia. And God willing, we are sharing those articles as a collective. It may just be all one book too, in all color, whatnot. And we also are aware that when we include the visuals, that does trigger further concerns, because it seems like the visuals, photographs, images, and additionally have further susceptibility of notions of propriety, and we're not trying to infringe upon other people's livelihood or otherwise. But we're doing what we can, and we're doing a service. So we trust in the honesty and integrity of our work. That's not an indemnity towards any type of agitation, but anyways, that's that. So that being said, we've done our still have yet to remember what I was thinking about sharing beforehand. It was something about civilization, and you know what it was? It was this metaphor. Okay, so when we talk about the rise and falls of civilization, the ebbs and flows of societies, and further, we talk about what's going on in this moment. Here's another way of looking at it in another context. If you think about like a sports phenom, like a sports celebrity, a legend, a sports legend, a Hall of Famer, champion, undefeated, invincible, eventually, at some point, that athlete has to retire. Everybody has to retire. And so then the question becomes, who fills those shoes? Like, it becomes another champion, another hero, whatever else. It may be for the same team, it may be a different team, or whatever else. But that's like the ebbs and flows of society. Now, the thing about it is that the one who fills the shoes might be the rival. It might be the arch enemy or otherwise. It might be some new unsung whatever who comes from the flyover states. That's the ebbs and flows of the sport game. Now, that being said, in the civilization game, what the champions endeavor to do is immediately hand the reins over to the child, to the son, generally speaking, to continue the legacy, to keep the championship in the family, and keep the reins of ownership and whatever else on society. Very difficult to do. But that's what people endeavor to do, and that's what's on the books for concerning inheritance. And additionally, but as we can see in the sport game, it's very difficult for a champion athlete to immediately hand the reins over to a son, or a mother to a daughter. There are occasions when a child of a legend becomes a legend in his or her own right. Usually, there's some space in between those occurrences, though, wherein in that space somebody else is the champion, somebody else is the legend for that moment. So just similarly within the area experiences of civilization, when we look at like an entire collective, Um, at some point, that civilization is on the wane. As we look at the full moon today, it's an auspicious day. It is the concluding day of Eid for the Hajj. It is the full moon Upasada day. It is Juneteenth for those that celebrate Juneteenth. For Juneteenth, we say big up Wolof, mindfulness of people, kinfolk's ancestry, the roots beyond the chains. So, and we're getting some Cajun style dal. Um, but let's wrap this up. How about that? Now I'm talking to this joint. What up? So, anyways, that's the metaphor. And as I was saying, there's something else that was valuable to share. Ah, it's about civilizations. Wow, it's gotten dark. It's beneficial to eat during the daylight. To be honest, I don't think it was actually. I think the nature of it is other than that deep, perhaps at the moment to be like straining for it. It is late. Concentration is lower, um, and it's other than a necessity at this moment. Uh, Obviously, I continue to sit here sweating for a reason, letting the doll likely burn further on the stove at the moment, get crustier and crustier. Probably is what it's doing. I'm doing it for a reason, and it's not for myself. I'm thinking like whoever has the influence of me or upon me, amidst me, to have me sit here and struggle for to say or share something. What is that kinfolk need at this moment? Um, why do I feel this necessity of sharing anything further as my eyes are blurry um, from looking at screens and dealing with heat? Beyond guilt or whatever else, yeah, I need to go to the dog because I can feel it getting hardened at this moment. Um, what's the nature of the suffering that's going on at this moment, particularly with the devices, particularly with the cybersphere? What is the nature of the suffering? Um, I was talking before about being enveloped in the vortex, and it's just a mind numbingness. It's not even like a pain per se. It's just like a zombie kind of experience. And I'm being like I'm in the articulate zone of the zombie experience at this moment, because it's been I would like to leave at this moment. I would like to stop talking and continue with it, but it's past 2100 hours at this moment. It's 20 to 22. It's late. Um, and it's beneficial for me to have some nourishment before going to sleep. It's beneficial for me to go to sleep. It's been a while since I've done my AM meditation and prayer, and so having a healthy night process is conducive towards having a healthy AM process. What is the sense of necessity for me being here at this moment? I can't say I don't feel the need of expressing myself because I'm sitting here, but it's difficult for me to think of anything that's. At first, I'm talking to a machine, and even with the notion of this being surveillanced by many entities at this moment off the record, and the prospect of this being uploaded and eventually seen by other kinfolk at some point in time. Like, still, I have other things. There's further priorities. Literally, there are further priorities. But are there if I'm not doing that? There is some sentience that emerges in that critique, soliciting the continuing paralysis at this moment. So what is the nature of the suffering? What are people yearning for? What do people need? What are people searching for? Meaning, affirmation, relationship, safety, peace, calmness. I search for meaningful conversation online, to be honest. I look for YouTubers and podcasts or whatever about people even just having honest conversation about something of meaning. It's very difficult to find, and that's part of the intention, and it's part of the susceptibility. So recognizing that is part of the intention for like controlling what people see and what people have access to and how much people are able to connect with each other, and accordingly recognizing that is the intention. That is an intention. Then it's on us to be further intentional, as a counterbalance to connect with each other and to be further regular and substantive in our communication. So it's better said than done. So rather than just talk about it, just do it. What else would kinfolk like from me at this moment? That's it. So that being said, we give all thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim, blessed love and peace, and Rastafari.